Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today at the final program in our Winter Speaker Series for the 2023-2024 season. Of course, we are here today at the Fraternal Order of Eagles, and thanks to Ladies Auxiliary, we are able to bring this program to you today. And word just came out of the kitchen that after this program concludes, there is a chili cook-off that you are invited to participate in, well, tasting for you, for $5 a person. So if you decide that you want to go over there into the bar afterwards, please know that you are welcome to do so. But again, we want to thank our host today for making the space available. It was absolutely frigid last time we were here. Today it's utterly gorgeous. It's just the complete opposite sides of the spectrum. But again, we are so thankful to be here. So we have Terrence Lynch here. He's going to do the presentation on Burnham's Chicago. So I'll give you a couple of announcements before we get started, as is our custom. Number one, big news as of March 1st, we have a buy one, get one free sale going on for the steamboats. So that means if you've never been, if you have been, but you want to bring a friend, great time to get tickets. Now, these are only for cruises that take place in the month of June. So it's buy one, get one free ticket for cruises in the month of June. You must buy in the month of March, though. Okay? So we're just trying to get some business drummed up there for the beginning of the season. So please spread the word and let everybody in your circle of influence know that this deal is available to them, and hopefully they'll be able to participate. Tomorrow is the last give back day of the season over at Morcus Chocolates. It's a very delicious program, so hopefully you will support this one as well. We had a really nice turnout for all the programs this year. I think there were 70 people that I personally greeted at Culver's, so I'm very thankful for those of you who came out and supported us that night. At least 30 people at Rosati's this year, and then of course all these other programs have been very well attended with the give back. Calumet Voices National Stories. I've been telling you about this, that the exhibit that was up at the field is coming to the Hammond Welcome Center. It is official. They open April 19th, and it'll be there till about October. So it's a really great local opportunity to see this exhibit that we had been curating and developing and taking all across the region. Now it's going to be in Hammond all summer. And you see a picture of our ice truck. The ice truck gets to be part of the exhibit because this is a much bigger exhibit space. So she's going to be up in Hammond all summer in a little cushy air-conditioned building, and you can go visit with her as well. So there's a picture of most of our artifacts that are in the exhibit there with when I was up at the field. So hopefully we're going to be able to do some extra programs up there as well. Maybe we can do a group outing. That's certainly a lot easier to get to than going all the way up to Chicago. So optimistic that we'll be able to do that program together. And the last thing I want to remind you about, save the date. So the May 7th event is going to happen on May 3rd this year. Because May 7th is like Election Day or something like that. It's a Tuesday night. I really was lobbying for doing it on the 7th because I'm a strict stickler for being accurate with history. However, I was worn down, and we're going to do it on Friday, May 3rd instead. But I believe that we're going to be having a pizza party social that night, and then the Hill, Melody Hill will also come and do a bar package, so we'll have a cash bar. We'll be awarding our annual Beatrice Horner Cultural Award that night, and you are going to get to see the results of the grant that we just received. Crown Point Community Foundation just awarded us with a grant to improve the kitchen. So the floors are being refinished and HVAC units being installed. We're getting a new fridge, a new freezer, new cooking equipment for our chef, Eric, who's going to be doing all the Baby Dewey cruises. So we're hoping to have the kitchen have its food safe certification, so it'll be considered a commissary kitchen. So when we're putting on programs now, very convenient, nice and clean and beautiful, and so we're really, really excited about that grant. Very thankful to the Crown Point Community Foundation for awarding us. So May 3rd, that's going to be your preview night, and again, hopefully a pizza party, and we'll have a bar and all that good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Daniel Burnham here in 1 second. We're going to save our questions for the end because I'll record this for our YouTube channel, and then we can be able to ask any questions that you would like to at the end of the program, okay? All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out today.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Well, thank you. I'm so glad we're all awake. Daniel Hudson Burnham here, the Chicago's #1 fan, I suppose is what I should say. However, now, if I were to tell you the truth, I'm not the first Chicago citizen. As a matter of fact, the first Chicago citizen was a citizen before Chicago was even a city. He was a guy by the name of Jean Pierre Dusable. Now, let me tell you a little bit about DeSalvo. His mother was a native Potawatomi Indian, I'm sorry, his father was the Potawatomi Indian. His mother was from the Barbados. He was basically a fur trapper. And he settled in the area of what the Potawatomi called the Chicagua River. Now, they called it that because of what grew there. And it wasn't Chicaguas. Or was it? It truly was. Chicagua is the Potawatomi word for stinky onion. And that's what grew on the Chicagua River. In the summertime, wild onions and leek and garlic would grow along the banks, and then it would get nice and humid and hot, and it would get nice and stinky. Now, by all accounts, that meant it was really not the most pleasant place to live. So why did DeSalvo settle down there? He hated people. He could not stand people, and he knew he'd have no close neighbors at that point in time. So he did a wonderful job staying there for a good long period of time. Did a lot of fur trapping, trading, as it were, along the way. People started to come closer and closer into his area. An area that was literally, I suppose I should ask this, anyone here from St. Louis? Good, because they get really offended at this point. And we didn't want to offend anyone here on a Sunday. He settled right where two wonderful gentlemen by the name of Marquette and Joliet christened the area as the gateway to the West. I say that because St. Louis has a gateway arch to the west, so they say, yeah, Chicago's, no, we had it first, actually, because Marquette and Joliet realized that the waterways, the highway of the day, that would literally be the easiest way from the people from the east to get to the west. And this was the gateway then, because the Great Lakes kind of dumped you right here. Then you'd have to do the riverways themselves. So we'll get back to the riverways in a minute. We have to finish up with DeSalvo, who found out that more and more people were settling in the area. Heavens to Betsy, yeah, there were like 30, 40 settlers in the area. That was getting a little bit too much for him. About 100 ended up in the area, and that's when the government wanted to step in. They wanted to put a fort in the area. Because you see, that would attract more settlers because they'd have the protection of the fort. If there was an uprising, they could all make it to the fort. The military would protect them. So once they put a fort in, he knew it was going to be trouble. And they were going to put that fort right across the other side of the riverbank from him. And they called this Fort Dearborn. As soon as he knew that they were going to put Fort Dearborn together there, he went to a fellow he knew by the name of Hubbard. And he sold his land, his house in the area, took his wife and children, got in a canoe and portaged down the Chicagua River, in through a couple of other portages and smaller tributaries, making their way into the Illinois River, eventually into the Mississippi, and then the last we hear of DeSalvo, he ends up in what will one day become the state of Missouri. But that's the end of it. However, he is known as the first Chicagoan, about, I would say, 3 decades before Chicago becomes Chicago formally itself. Hubbard will go on to become very successful in the area. He will have a trading post. He will expand his horizons there. He and his family will be involved in one of the major events that is associated with Chicago along the way. And he will actually marry a princess of the Potawatomi tribe by the name of Watsika. That will help him. It'll be very instrumental in a couple of years. People are starting to come into the area, so DeSalvo was right. If you were wondering where his place was, it actually was, well, in today's standards, it would be on the north bank of the Chicago River, right where Michigan Avenue is. His house is there no longer. It is, however, wonderful. They put a nice little bust of him right up there near the street with a statue of the top of his body. But where his house really was, where he traded furs, there is a structure there now, and you can buy and sell things there. Well, you can buy things there. It's the Apple store. So, they stopped selling fur pelts, and now they're selling Apple products at this spot. But that's about where he was, right there on the banks itself. People do arrive, and across the river, they feel very safe because they've got this wonderful thing called Fort Dearborn. Well, a funny thing happens. The people out east get in a war and a fight with Great Britain, and they want their independence, and they get it, and everyone figures it's all over and done with, but it's not, because by 1812 they want to fight it all over again. And one of the first fights in the War of 1812 actually occurs right there, well, technically not at Fort Dearborn, but that's the name it will get, the Fort Dearborn Massacre. I have to explain a little bit to you. The settlers are hearing a lot of rumblings. The Potawatomi have two factions. They have a friendly faction that actually associates with the settlers, Watseka, Hubbard, a good example of that. And then you have the hostiles, who literally don't want all of these invaders coming into the area and taking over their land. And they would really like to see all the settlers go away. Well, along comes this war that's going on with Great Britain called the War of 1812, which is actually just an overflow of other battles that Great Britain's involved in, and they decide they want to recoup some of their goods by taking back what they lost in the Revolutionary War. So what happens is the British decide to convince the natives of the land, the Indians, that if they help them chase the settlers out, England will give them back their land, because all they want is the land up to the Allegheny mountain range. That's what Great Britain's saying, although they've already been claiming Virginia all the way out to the Mississippi River, but that's a whole other technicality. So they convince a lot of these hostile natives to have uprisings, to intimidate the settlers themselves. Scuttlebutt's coming about this, and the commander, William Wells, of the fort in a place you may have heard of, Fort Wayne, founded by, Wild Jack Wayne, I believe his name was. He was a captain under Harrison that had a magnificent, successful victory against the Indians in an area that would end up becoming Indiana, I should say, itself. You look all puzzled, but you shouldn't be, because that's the state wind right now, folks. And it had a lot to do with fighting the Indians. So they were known as good Indian fighters, the soldiers that were in Fort Wayne. And so they decided they're going to go up what's called the Vincennes Trail to Fort Dearborn, and they're going to bring all those settlers back so they have a central location to fight the aggressors from. And your reputation in this area is better at fighting Indians than out further west. We're kind of like the greenhorns, as it were. However, they are ruled by a guy by the name of Heald, Commander Heald. However, William Wells comes with 8 of his soldiers to help escort all of the settlers and the military out of Fort Dearborn, right there on the riverbank itself, back down the Vincennes Trail to Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's not Indiana yet. It was going to be Indiana, but then this war starts getting in the way, so you don't get to become a state until after the war. Sorry about that. I kind of buried the lead there. So what happens is they get up there, and on August 16th, they get some of the friendly Potawatomi to help escort them out of the area till they're safe far along the Vincennes Trail. And they take it from Fort Dearborn, right up there by the river, and they go down about 2 miles along the lakefront, and it's a fascinating, parade. See, the center column is the settlers and the carriages and then they're escorted on the sides by soldiers, and then on the further out flanks are the native Indians. So you've got column upon column in the center, but something happens about 2 miles down. All of the native Indians that are closest to the lake start to slow down and trail back. And by the time anyone realizes what's going on, it's too late. because over the ridge comes hostile Indians, and they are pummeling the settlers and the soldiers because they are firing their weaponry, their arrows, right into all of these columns, not hesitating because none of the natives are in the line of fire. They basically cleared themselves away from the aggressors. It becomes known as a massacre. The native people call it a victory. And they will point out, it's always fascinating, whenever the natives or the Indians won a battle, it was called a massacre. Whenever the settlers won a battle, it was called a victory. A very interesting difference. I guess it's whoever the history writers are. So this is what's known as the Fort Dearborn Massacre. Didn't occur at Fort Dearborn. Everyone was about 2.5 miles down the road to the south. And you can't go to where the massacre occurred at this point in time, because if you do, well, you can go there, but it doesn't look geographically like it did at the time. I just explained to you, this all happened right on the lakefront, right? So if you go about 2 miles down the lakefront on Lake Michigan, you're not going to be at the Fort Dearborn Massacre. You're going to be probably about the 50-yard line, the stadium that the Bears like to lose games in. And that wasn't there at the time. That was in Lake Michigan. What you have to do is go about 4 blocks west of there, and you'll find a little park, and you won't find a statue there anymore because they said it was a little bit too, shall we say, racist. It had Native Americans killing and murdering women and children in very graphic ways. It's a beautiful statue. It is now in a warehouse, so nobody can see it. But the park is still there, and there is a plaque that this is where the Fort Dearborn uprising occurred. It's not called a massacre anymore. But once they finished killing about 88 of the settlers and taking the rest prisoner, or some escaped into the woods with some friendly natives, Hubbard, Watsika, several others, who were actually almost sold as slaves, but then were finagled away, made their way to Fort Detroit. A whole different story. However, they leave the 88 dead bodies right there on the lakefront. As a warning sign for anyone who thinks it could come back, this will show them what the natives are doing to the area. And just in case they think they could be safe in that fort, they go up to the fort and they burn it to the ground. That is known as the Fort Dearborn Massacre. It occurs on August 16th of 1812. And it is known as one of the major events in the city of Chicago. They figured that's going to end anyone settling in Chicago near the Stinky Onion ever again, because they burned down the fort and they left the dead bodies there. The war ends, and the people start coming right back, because they rebuild the fort right in the same location. They make it a little bit more structurally sound, a little bit safer. They have a nice little trap door through one of the ammunition sheds. It's a secret tunnel that if the fort is under attack, you can go through that tunnel. It'll let you out into the Chicago River, and you can canoe right into the lake and supposedly make it to safety on Lake Michigan. Have you any of you seen Lake Michigan? Getting on there with a canoe? Well, I guess it's better than being attacked by Indians. No. But that's all going to be redesigned there, and it's going to bring more and more people back to the city of Chicago. As a matter of fact, by 1833, they will have 300 people in the surrounding area. They will literally incorporate in March of that year as a town. That bustling town, that toddling town, I suppose is what you would call it. And by 37, they will have enough to go from a town to a city. They've expanded upward because they've got almost 1,000 people there. This is just multiplying and multiplying and multiplying, because it is probably the biggest outpost that people are going to, and it's easy to get to. You don't have to follow the Indian trails. You can actually literally make your way through on the waterways, and they're far easier to navigate. And so they are right. Joliet and Marquette, boom, they're right. This is the gateway, and everyone's coming here, and everyone is going and coming, and lo and behold, this guy from the East Coast who wants to be success decides he's not going to hang out on the East Coast near Massachusetts because they didn't let him into Harvard. So he's going to go out west and he's going to become a politician, and he's going to get himself a job as a politician out in Arizona, and nobody knows my name out there. So I lose my election, and I decide I will come back to the Midwest, because you know what's happening? I'm finding out that all these people are settling in this place called Chicago, and if they don't succeed at one thing, they just turn around and they try to do something else. And if they can't do that, guess what? They go and try and do something else. And if they can't do that, nobody laughs at them. They just try something else. They keep trying things until they find something they're good at. I like that attitude. It's a can-do attitude, and it is what I enjoy. And I decided I'm going to settle down here in the city of Chicago, and I'm going to do something that I couldn't get a degree in, and that is architecture. In case you were wondering, that guy I was talking about from the East Coast, that's me. I wasn't born in Chicago. I actually ended up settling here in Chicago. I should have been on the East Coast. I was from East Coast breeding, and I literally just panicked at my Harvard entrance exams. I'm so worried and fixated on that when my son wanted to go to Harvard, I literally donated about $50,000 so they could build a new building at Harvard and put me on the board just in case my son didn't get in. Yeah, he actually never panicked. He did get in and go through their architectural firm school, and it was pretty interesting because by that point in time, people are quoting me as one of the world-renowned architects. But that's a story for another day. We're here to talk about Chicago, my favorite town. Yes, indeed. So I come in and I settle in the area. I start working at an architectural firm. And I got to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm working at this firm, and people will come in and say, Mr. Burnham, we would like to redo our house. What we'd like to do is we'd like this glorious stone fireplace, and what we'd like is another focal point over here, and we'd like this great open space area here. Can you do all that? And I said, yes, yeah, but every other architect said that means that we'd have to get rid of the supporting wall. And they said, you can't do that. Oh, we can do it here at this firm. And then they'd leave, and I turned to my friend, John Wellborn Root, who was a magnificent architect, and I said, John, can we do that? He goes, well, no, but Dan, you told him we can, so now I got to find a way to make it happen. And we started working together as a great team. I came up with ideas without following the laws of architecture, and John found a way to make them work. We became so successful together that we actually branch off and start our own business. I have to tell you a little bit about myself because it's at the same time all these other things are happening with other people who had failed elsewhere and came to the Midwest and started finding a success because people didn't hold their failures against them, and they thought it was just a way for them to finally get closer to that thing that's going to strike it for them. I will end up associated with a lot of those people. For one of the first people I associate with is a gentleman that comes in and he wants me to do some work for him. He's familiar with my work because what I did is I designed the entranceway arch for what will be known as the Union Stockyards. The Union Stockyards will open up in '65. It's a fascinating story. The stockyards will actually be the place where all the drovers bring in all their livestock close to civilization. This is civilization, Chicago. So it's easier to get the livestock here. They will be sold at auction right there in the stockyards, and then they will actually be prepared because of technology to be shipped out. This will become the focal point of the city of Chicago. We'll open the Union Stockyards on Christmas Day of '65, and we will welcome everyone in. This will be a featured point for us for many years to come. We will offer tours of the Union Stockyards. People will come here to see the magnificence of how we can bring in all this livestock and ship them out the other side in refrigerated trains as all pieces of bacon and pork chops and ground beef and sirloin, because we literally will slaughter them on site. It's an amazing structure. We will invite people. A gentleman from Detroit will come and see this, and we're very proud to show this at the stockyards. We'll bring a pig in, and we've got a slaughter wheel, and literally the pig is attached to the wheel by hook, and what happens is, in each phase of the game, someone is trained to do 2 or 3 specific techniques on this pig, so that by the end, that wheel is empty, and nothing is left but, as some people say, the squeak in the tail itself, because they will actually slice it up and do different things to end up taking this pig apart. By going down, not the men moving around and doing this, you usually hire a butcher to do this whole process, but instead we train men to do 1 or 2 portions of that process and just leave them there doing their work and sending the pig down the line on this hooked wheel itself. The man I'm talking about who sees this and thinks it's wonderful is a guy by the name of Henry Ford. He says, if you can take a pig apart, I can put a car together. And instead of destroying something, he's creating something, and uses the same technology to have men build a car. Instead of teaching them how to build the whole car together, which is what most inventors of automobiles are doing at the time. Charles Duryea from down in Peoria made a beautiful car, won the first auto race, actually out of Chicago in '92. He was successful, but we don't have a whole bunch of Duryeas out on the road, do we? But we do have Fords. That's because Ford went to the stockyards and saw what we did. Duryea took about 6 people and showed them how to build a car, and 2 years later they built their second car. He had won $2,000 in the race. That money was gone, and now he had 1 car to sell. And if it takes him 2 more years, he still hasn't broken even. Ford says, you know what, if I have a whole bunch of people, we can make a lot of cars all at the same time. So we're going to take that Union Stockyard idea and reverse it. And that's how he starts his assembly line. And he thanks us for it and gives us credit for it down the road. But the stockyards, we're just so proud of them. Yes. Now I said we use everything on the pig except the squeak in the tail. If you've had a Chicago hot dog, sometimes you question whether or not those are involved as well. But there are parts of animals we don't use in the stockyards. And you know what we do with them? We dispose of them. You know where we like to dispose of them? In the South Branch of the Chicago River. It already smells. I mean, it's called stinky onion. So we just take those carcasses and we throw them into the river. Oh, and it's really cute. They just disappear underneath about 4 inches of sludge and grease and sink, bloop, 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 never to be seen again. However, they are kind of seen because the South Branch gets this nickname called Bubbly Creek. Because where we've been disposing of all these parts of animals, it starts bubbling up. It's like a caffeinated river of its own. What it actually is a chemical reaction to decomposing animal carcasses under the water. And that creates a thing called methane gas. And that methane gas is lighter than the water, so it forces its way out of the river and through the about 4 inches of sludge and grease and grime and pollution, and pops. Oh, how cute and how wonderful, how flammable as well. But that's what we're doing. We're throwing all these parts into the river, and they're just disappearing, and we have no problems with them whatsoever. This is all going on, and it's all working wonderfully and successfully until we have a really hot and dry summer. And during this dry summer, we don't get rain. As a matter of fact, from I think about June to October, we get a total of, I think, 4.5, 5 inches of rain. And between September and October 8th, we get a 1/2 inch of rain. That's it. Get a lot of wind, so it's bone dry. And the city of Chicago has been bursting at the seams, bustling. We have been expanding and expanding and expanding. I got to tell you a little bit about the layout of the downtown area. See, when we started building the downtown area, we were going to be really intelligent with it. The streets are all dirt. So we're going to use the latest technology, and we're going to pave those streets in the city of Chicago. So it's easier for the carriages and not as messy. And by 1871, we have, wow, let me see. Yes, we have 75 miles of paved street in the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago encompasses about 9 square miles itself, and 75 miles are paved. 15 of those miles are paved with brick. Do you know what the rest is paved with? Wood, yeah. Pine wood, big like planks, like almost like railroad tracks. So we've got wood on the ground. The buildings that we're building, because we don't want to spend a lot of money on them, we're using the cheapest material, which is wood. Wood, yeah. So we're building those as well. And then for people who are actually going downtown, we don't want them messing up their clothes in that. So we don't want them walking right on the street. So we build a boardwalk, basically a wooden sidewalk. But not like you would see, just a little bit off the ground. We put it about 10 feet, about 10, 15 feet off the ground. So you're elevated, which is nice because then all the business buildings downtown, well, they can come in and unload right on the street level. And the people are up above that on the pedestrian level, walking up above it. So it's pretty nice. This works wonderfully for them. It also creates an interesting effect, like a tunnel on the lower level of these buildings, street by street by street. It kind of keeps the wind down because of these overhangs, the street itself and sidewalk. So, but that's all going on. Something interesting is happening. There's a lot of fires bursting up and out in the city of Chicago at this time. Within that year, they will have 600 fires. And they will be successful in putting them all out with only 185 men in the fire department altogether, and only 16 basically pumpers, or steamers is what we call them. So it's an amazing, but they do a lot of defensive tactics and this and that and the other thing. And long story short, on the 7th, it's a Saturday night, a fire starts in downtown Chicago, right on the Chicago River itself. It starts in a wood planing factory, which is right there, and they have a lot of wood. A fire starts and it erupts, and they own about half the block. The fire department's called in, and by about 2 in the morning, it's a 3-alarm fire. That means every one of the 185 men are fighting this fire. It is now gobbling up block after block because these blocks are built of buildings mostly made of wood. So it's getting dangerous, it's getting hairy, but they started a defensive perimeter around it, and at the same time, there's a tavern a couple blocks away from where the fire is, and the tavern owner realizes, my business is sunk. So he says, drinks are on the house, folks, and he starts giving away all this booze behind the bar. And everyone starts drinking it, and they're enjoying it, and having a wonderful time, and they decide, you know what, they don't want to see this guy's place burned down, so they start their own fire brigade. They open up one of the hydrants, and they start a bucket brigade, and what they're doing is basically taking the water out of the hydrant line and throwing it on his building, just saturating his wood, which is basically what the firemen are doing outside of the fire parameters themselves. That's how they fight the fire. Well, when all is said and done, those 4 blocks the next day are burnt to the ground, except for one building. And it's that tavern. Problem is, he's got no more product to sell, but he's got a building. So they saved the building, but drink them dry, as it were. However, that's how they fight fires, and that's what the fire department was doing. I tell you that because the fire department's exhausted now, and on Sunday night, they get a call for another fire about 8 blocks from where this major fire was, this 4-block fire was. Now the alarms go off and they're sent to the wrong places, and there's a series of incidents. The fire is alerted at about 8:30, but nobody really is fighting it until 9:30, which means the fire's already taken over this block on the south side. It's destroyed the O'Leary barn. The wind is going in a northeasterly direction, and it's taking embers and dropping them on different buildings, and they're starting to burst into flames as well. Not only that, but what's even more amazing is buildings are like almost self-exploding because of the heat, the volume of the heat nearby. And so it's so intense buildings are bursting into flames. So the fire department, which has just finished fighting a fire only about 12 hours earlier, is now all back on, all 185 people, trying to fight this fire. In the meantime, an ex-alderman goes to the fire chief, and he comes up with a great idea. He says, what we'll do is, what they do when they fight fires out in the wilderness, we'll get a fire line. We'll clear an area. And the way this guy wants to clear an area is dynamite. Open up a space. How he knew there was dynamite in the basement of City Hall, I don't know. How he got his hands on it, again, I don't know that either. But I do know this, the fire chief said, do whatever you want. He doesn't have time to deal with them, but then he does, because he blows up a building and starts a new fire in the line of the other fire itself. And he doesn't do it once, he does it twice. So now they're fighting the fire in the direction it's going, and now they're fighting a fire that's going to meet up with it, because this guy's blowing up buildings to stop the fire, just start a new one, as it were. Everyone thinks, oh, it'll be fine because it's going towards the south branch of the Chicago River. That'll stop it. The bubbly creek that has methane gas, it's not going to stop it. It literally welcomes it across the river and brings it into the downtown area. By the next day, it is heading towards City Hall. The mayor has been instructing the police department and the fire department to telegraph any surrounding areas to get help to come back down to help out with this fire. We'll end up having fire crews come all the way from Cleveland, from Louisville, Kentucky, from several different areas of Indiana, and one will try and make it here but will not, from Peshtigo, Wisconsin. Peshtigo is just outside Green Bay, Wisconsin. They will hear of our call for help. Their fire department will jump on a train and start heading down here, only to find out when they're refueling that there's a fire in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. So they will turn around to go back there. By the time they get back there, that town is gone. Wow. And 2,500 people are dead.
Wow.
The Peshtigo fire will be the worst fire to occur that night. And yet, everyone knows of the Great Chicago Fire. Peshtigo fire lost 2,500 people. It encompassed over 2.5 million acres of land. It will actually skirt around part of Green Bay and hop into Door County and do some destruction there. Chicago's fire isn't even the second worst fire that night. That actually takes place in Port Huron, out of just outside the Detroit area, and Grand Haven will have two fires that will combine to be even worse than the Chicago fire as far as land mass. They will encompass the death of about 600 people, which makes the Great Chicago Fire the third worst fire that day. But we have a better PR machine than anyone else. So everyone knows about the Great Chicago Fire and not those other two fires. Chicago will honor Peshtigo by naming a street for those heroes that missed both fires, that fire department. But they didn't want to draw too much attention to them because that street's 1 block long. It's 1 block long. Blink and you miss it. It's over by Navy Pier. If you're on Lakeshore Drive and you're going across the river there, just turn and look to the west. And between Grand and Illinois, that first street you see there, Peshtigo Court. There you go. And then you're gone. You're past it. So we are well aware of what happens elsewhere. The Chicago fire will actually burn for 3 days. It'll start on a Sunday night. It'll end on a Tuesday morning. It will encompass a third of the city, about 3.3 square miles of the city of Chicago. It will head in a northeasterly direction. It will destroy City Hall, where only a few years earlier the body of Abraham Lincoln laid in state for 3 days before making its way down to Springfield. They will rebuild City Hall in the same exact location. That will be the fourth City Hall to sit on that structure. To this day, it's still that building. So we haven't had any other reason to destroy it or burn it down, even with the politics that go on there, lo and behold. It will burn down a couple of other buildings in the area that are of importance to me because they are owned by friends of mine. And one of them is owned by a man who came to the area to be a clerk. His father wanted him to be his accountant back on the East Coast, but he didn't want to be an accountant, so he came here and went to work for a dry goods owner by the name of Potter Palmer. This man was magnificent. He went up the ranks very quickly and became Potter Palmer's #1 clerk. And he got every raise possible. Have we got any Scotch people here in the audience? Any Scotch people? Okay, because sometimes they don't like the way I say this. Scotch are very, what they call themselves, frugal. Everyone else calls them cheap. Potter Palmer's Scotch. He doesn't believe in credit. He believes in no credit whatsoever. If you don't have cash, you have no business being in his stores. He's got a dry goods place right there on the Chicago River, and his #1 salesman is this guy by the name of Marshall Field. Marshall Field has reached the limit of everything he can get out of Potter. He's gotten every raise he can. He's the highest ranking salesman, so he's at a dead end. This is when he offers to Potter to do something. He says, "Mr. Palmer, look, I know you like me and you respect me, but I would really be honored if you would give me this other job." And Potter says, "What's that?" He says, "Sir, every morning I'm here and watch the security guard come and open the business. And every year I'm the last to leave and watch that security guard come back and lock up the business. What I'd take as an honor would be if you would give me that responsibility, and I would ask for nothing more than the trust from you, the great Potter Palmer, to do this." Isn't that something? He doesn't want any money. Do you know what Potter Palmer says? "Oh, you don't want any more money? And now I'm not paying a security guard to come and open and to close it at night? Oh, boy, the job is yours." He gives him the keys to the place, and he gets rid of the security guard. And to his word, Marshall Field does that every morning. He opens the business, and every night he locks it up. But he does it from the inside. See, he didn't need a raise because he gets rid of his apartment, and he has no rent to pay. So he gave himself a raise. Potter finds out that Marshall's living in the store. Does that get Potter upset? No, because now he's got 24-hour security when he's not paying for that. So he loves this idea. He loves Marshall Field, and eventually when Potter Palmer falls madly in love and wants to change businesses, he offers to sell the business to Marshall. Marshall says, "I'd love to do it, but I don't want it to be right here on the Chicago River. I want to buy one of your other properties just a little bit further into the city on Washington and State." And he says, "Oh, sure, yeah, I'll sell you that warehouse. But, you know, it's going to cost you for the Teamsters to bring everything and unload it and bring it down there. That's why I have the place right on the riverfront. The boat comes into the river, docks right here across. They just bring it across the street. It's very frugal. It's very frugal. Very cheap. Very cheap." Marshall says, "I've got an idea, sir. I'm going to move it down that way. And I want it there because I don't want people to get all messed up. Because, you see, I want the women to come to my store." The women to his store. Women don't make decisions in the 1800s. They've got too small a brain to comprehend the magnificence of calculating whether you're getting a deal or a bargain. Yes, indeed. And now Marshall Field says that they're the ones he's going to cater to. He goes one better. He builds them a public restroom up on the second floor of his building, which means any woman downtown Chicago can go in there and use the bathroom. Well, see, the only other public restrooms are in taverns, and any respectable woman would not be caught dead in a public house where you're drinking and imbibing. So that meant, ladies, if you were downtown and you had the call of nature, you better be able to hold it till you get home. Because there are no places for you to use until Marshall Field builds this public restroom on the second floor of his building. Yes, and you know what? You run in the door, you go up the stairs, you head in there. He even has a lounge area in case you're so exhausted from seeing the stupendous magnificence of the downtown area. So you can lounge and compose yourself after all of these things you've seen, because, you know, and then once you settle down, you can leave the establishment. Of course, interestingly enough, to get back out of the building, you come out of that bathroom, you are right next to perfume and jewelry, and then there's dresses, and then now that you've got a little time to relax, you didn't realize, oh, they have some other gadgets here and some kitchen appliances, and before you know it, you might be trying to pick something up because you're so grateful for the guy who didn't make you go all the way back home to use the facilities. He starts a thing called Give the Lady What She Wants, and it's catering to women. And he realizes men pretend that they're the decision makers. Women are the decision makers in a family. They know what's going on, and everything that's in his store caters to a family. Thus, the woman's going to decide. So make it comfortable for her. He will add several other things onto it, including demonstrations, cooking demonstrations, on-the-spot discounts if you purchase right there, that are latest in technology. And then, in case you get hungry, he decides to open up his cafeterias to the public, not just his employees, so that, like his employees, who he wants to keep in his store, he wants the same thing for his clientele. Keep you in the store to have something to eat, and then come back for something in the afternoon without leaving the store itself. Before you know it, he's catering to all this right there on State and Washington. He has a little fire, but he takes care of it. The employees are really good about moving the product out of the way when the fire comes through, and says, well, see, now I've got nothing to worry about. Lightning never strikes twice in the same spot. Oh, that fire was back in, I think, like 69, 70. In 71, right after the Great Chicago Fire burns down City Hall, it burns down Marshall Field's department store a couple blocks away. Oh, and it burns down something else. You remember the man he bought this from, Potter Palmer? Mm-hmm. Well, Potter went into the real estate business, became very successful, and married a woman by the name of Bertha Honoré. And for a wedding present, he bought her and built her a state-of-the-art, fireproof hotel called, modestly enough, the Palmer House Hotel. And guess what? Like the Titanic, that phrase was a bad thing to say. Fireproof hotel? No. It burned to the ground as well. But it was a wedding present, so he rebuilt it in her honor, and it is still there to this very day. The second time around, he put the Otis elevators in there, which meant he could make it bigger and house more people. It will become an unofficial host headquarters for a magnificent event that will occur in a few years. In case you were wondering, we do end up taking care of the Great Chicago Fire. Once everything's burnt down, it burns out. It heads in northeasterly direction, and it burns out because of one thing. Runs out of things to burn. And it starts to drizzle and rain. And it ends up by the lakefront itself, where there was a Indian burial ground and pauper's grave. So there was really no flora or fauna, and it was really not even grass there, it was just dirt. So it literally just ran out. That area then would become the Lincoln Park Zoo. So the fire started to the south and came across that whole area. Now, remember the fire I told you about that occupied those men the day before, but the tavern was saved? Mm-hmm. That fire occurred about 8 blocks north of Mrs. O'Leary's. If you're at the Lincoln Park Zoo, in the southern end of the zoo, where the fire ended, that is now the farm in the zoo. If you turn around, you look back to one of the tallest buildings in the world, a building I still call Sears Tower, because I'm too old and stubborn to change to Willis Tower or learn the actual address of the building, because I think that's the name of it right now. Everything between you and that building was destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire. That building is where that fire started the day before the O'Leary Fire. The O'Leary Fire was about 8 blocks to the south, where now there is a magnificent statue of a ever-burning fire, a flame, on the location of the O'Leary Farm. And also on that structure there is now in the Chicago Fire Academy, where they train all firefighters, first responders, to learn how to treat and save people in fires themselves. That's a reminder. So they are all trained right there where the Great Chicago Fire started. The third worst fire in 1871 in the Midwest. Now that I covered all that and I jumped us ahead there, I can tell you that we were very proud because we rebuilt the city. I saw it as a clean slate, And this was an idea I had for a long time. See, I had started an architectural firm differently than others. I started a firm that had a residential department, that had an office department, that had a department store department, that had warehouse department. In other words, I had different specialty architects in my firm, and I oversaw all of them. Before me, you went to an architect who only did houses, an architect who only did apartment buildings, an architect who did hospitals. I put them all together so that if any part of the architectural field is slow, other departments will pick up the slack. So I will actually make it through ups and downs of the architectural firms themselves. It will become a model that others will follow from that day forward. I'll become a master of organizing things. Not technically being an architect. Louis Sullivan will tell you, I'm not an architect, I'm a good PR man. But he is kind of right, because what I do is I actually manage a bunch of architects and make sure that people get what they want for it. I helped rebuild Marshall Field's department store. We expanded. Before you know it, his department store covers an entire city block. People are positive that's why he's successful, and so they hire me to build their stores. I build Wanamakers, I build Filene's, I even end up building this place in New York called Macy's, because they're all positive it was my architectural design that is why he's succeeding, when it's the reality of what he's seeing and catering to the right clientele, which is the people themselves, specifically the women. But I don't care. I'm getting a lot of business out of Marshall Field. I will be very instrumental in several things. And then Potter Palmer and his wife Bertha and Marshall Field and several other people like Armour and Swift will come to me and say, Dan, we want you to lead a committee because the government wants to have a World's Fair celebrating Christopher Columbus discovering America. And we want Chicago to have it. New York wants it, Philadelphia wants it, Boston wants it. They all feel they should have it because, they're the East Coast Patriots, it should all be there. Cleveland wants it, and St. Louis is talking, they want it as well. So we better have a committee from here. And they like the way I organize things, so I put together a committee, and we go to New York because they bring the Congress to New York to determine where we're going to have this. And New York's one of them that's in the running for it. So most people figure it's a done deal. It's politics. They're bringing them to New York. New York's going to win. Well, when the dust settles, New York did not win the contract for the World's Fair. The city of Chicago did, because they had the best politician alive, the guy who could never get elected in Arizona. A man who loved the city of Chicago better than anyone else, the transplanted Massachusetts, Daniel Burton. I had politicked, I had shaken hands, and I convinced him we could do it. And we did it. We built a city within a city, and it was magnificent, folks. It was the World's Fair beyond World's Fairs. It was to celebrate Christopher Columbus's discovery in America. 1492, sailed the ocean blue. Our World's Fair would then have to be in 1893. I opened it in 1892, but we weren't ready. So what happened was I hired a guy by the name of Frederick Law Olmsted to design all of the landscape around the buildings, and he wouldn't put certain things in until we were positively finished with some of the buildings. Thus, that put us about 6 months behind schedule. So that meant we were not going to open on the 400th anniversary of Columbus. So what we did was I came up with an idea. I opened up the grounds for some political speeches, some wonderful things like that, and some entertainment. And you, for 10 cents, could come hear those speeches and look at the buildings from the outside. You weren't allowed to go inside them yet, because they weren't done inside at all. And it made it sound like any day now we'll be ready. And then, really to guarantee people will be there, not to hear politicians, I had a dear friend by the name of John Philip Sousa, who had just gone into the civilian ranks and started his own band called the John Philip Sousa Band, play a concert. So you got to hear a concert, and then I said, thank you all for coming. Come back in the spring when we're going to have you go through all the buildings. It'll be wonderful and spectacular. And nobody questioned the fact that we really didn't open on time. I started a tradition. Anniversaries don't really make sense in the city of Chicago. I was off by a year. Millennium Park was off by 4 years, I believe it was, until they finally officially opened it up. I think I know why they didn't get the 2016 Olympics. We'd still be waiting to see the torch come. We just don't care for dates. It's not important to us. But we did open the fair, and it was a huge success. It literally was a huge success. 27.5 million people came to the city of Chicago. They saw some of the greatest and wonderful ideas and inventions of a lifetime. They were illuminated at night by incandescent light bulb, bouncing off of these beautiful white buildings that gave us the nickname the White City. It was spectacular. And those incandescent light bulbs were made by who? Nikola Tesla. No, Edison's expensive. He's expensive. Tesla is practical. Tesla is practical. Tesla has alternating current. Edison has direct current. Direct current is inefficient, and it has to be recharged very quickly. Edison likes that grid system because that means he can build you a substation every mile. Tesla's efficient alternating current keeps that strength and energy for 10 miles. So you only have to build a substation every 10 miles. Tesla's not concerned with making a profit. Edison is. For the World's Fair, we promised our stockholders we would give them a profit. There's no way we're going to have these substations all over the place and pay Edison before we even light up the building. So we go with Tesla and his light bulb. However, he thought he could just put his light bulb into the sockets of Edison's light bulbs into his socket. Edison intentionally designs them so they won't fit into Tesla's grid system. So Tesla has to come up with his own design light bulbs. And he is supported by a man by the name of Westinghouse. Westinghouse will support him. It's a fascinating story. Edison and Tesla will be competitors throughout their lives. And eventually they will both be bought out. And it'll end up going to Morgan and then eventually be known as General Electric, GE. So they'll all get scooped up. Interesting enough, at the World's Fair, everyone will call it Edison's light bulb because he has about 6 or 7 different inventions in the Hall of Technology, and one of them is a 40-foot illuminated sign that spells out Edison. So they just assume he's Mr. He is a great promoter, and we give him that. But that was on his own dime. Our dime, we wanted the cheap, efficient, and so we went with Tesla. Tesla's substations and his energy efficiency gave us and generated enough power to light the entire fairgrounds each night and have 3 days worth of excess electricity for the city of Chicago, the whole city. It was an efficient form of energy and a grid system that was very efficient. That was one of the highlights of the fair itself. We told everyone, we boasted, look at this, we rebuilt the city of Chicago after the fire, we built the lakefront up, we even built a city within the city. Oh, and all the politicians on the East Coast say, oh my God, if you go to the World's Fair, be careful. Those politicians are full of hot air. It's nothing but a windy city. And that's how we get the nickname Windy City, because we're busy patting ourselves on the back for what a great job we did. We did do a great job. We rebuilt the city, and within 20 years, built another city within the city that would actually bring 27.5 million people to the city itself. We can do it. And how did we do it? There was a genius of a man coordinating it and overseeing the whole project, a managing director, as you would say, himself. And he has another plan, and that plan is to rebuild the city of Chicago as well. And that man is me. And right after the fair, I want to go right into convincing all the powers that be that we need to redesign the city of Chicago and organize chaos. Everyone knows my phrase that is no small dreams. You got to dream big. Small dreams will not stir men's imaginations or blood, and they will never be seen. Dream big, and it stirs your imaginations and your blood. That is when everyone knows The one I usually would say to people is, I like to organize chaos. The city of Chicago was chaos, and after the fire, I tried to organize as best I could, but still, we needed to have a plan of action. And so I start working on what I will be calling the Chicago Plan. Actually, it will be called the Burnham and Bennett Plan for the City of Chicago, and then eventually it'll somehow just become known as the Burnham Plan. William Bennett will actually become my assistant after John Wilborn Root dies. And Bennett will be asked, well, do you mind that it's becoming known as the Burnham Plan? He says, are you kidding me? I'm learning from one of the greatest men there ever was for city planning. Mr. Bennett will then go on to plan out a city on another river, and that is Elgin. He will actually design the city of Elgin himself. I will design the city of Chicago, and I will think this is going to just be wonderful, but the problem is we're in a recession, and nobody wants to spend money, especially not tax dollars, on, shall we say, public works projects. Yes. We've done a few already. We've actually elevated the city streets so that they don't sink into the peat bog that the city is on. And that's how we get the elevated train tracks. We're the first ones to put those tracks up there. The reason we do that is because if you put them right with the ground, they're going to sink in. And it would be noticeable because then the earth would be on top of the tracks. So if you put them on pylons and you put them up, even though they're going to sink, they're not going to sink that much so that they cover the tracks with earth, because you put them up about 20 to 25 feet. And that's what we did. That was one of our first projects. Our first official project from the Chicago plan will be the widening of a street that is known as Roosevelt Road. And we will do that. That will be our first city works plan for the Chicago plan. The plan will be put together with the advice and ideas of many different people, politicians. I will actually inquire with the great Teddy Roosevelt, who's a friend of mine. I will inquire with Jane Addams. She will suggest I have local hospitals in the neighborhoods, because the neighborhoods are basically small countries of their own. The Polish are here, the German are here, the Irish are here. They don't like to travel out of their own areas, and so they want a hospital right there. We basically take apartment buildings and make them small community hospitals. We'll have them scattered throughout the city itself, and they will be run by immigrants of the same nationalities. That way you feel safe and you can acclimate, and in those neighborhoods we'll have schools that will teach these children so that generations will start to expand out, feel comfortable moving into other neighborhoods. Jane Burns said that the schools should always stay within the neighborhood, or it's going to cause trouble for the students who have to go into other neighborhoods. She was speaking because of different nationalities. Unfortunately, it will become gangs. She was dead right. You should keep all your teaching right in your own neighborhoods. As we expand it, that becomes a problem. She also told us we needed to have public green space in the neighborhoods, because it is building after building after building. And so we agree with her. For every 100 people, we should have an acre of land. That's the land that we're not going to get any taxes on. So we agree with her, but then we change it to for every 600 people, we'll give you an acre of land. So the more populous the area, theoretically the more land you would have, but about a sixth of what you should have for it to actually be beneficial for people. So they're not coughing on each other right over each other's shoulders. So it does work out to a certain extent. Our park district system is magnificent and stupendous. I'm very proud of everything that's going on. By 1909, I introduced that plan to the world. The first speech I give on my Chicago plan is actually the night of the beginning of the second World Series ever to be played. And it is all being played right here in Chicago, because it's the Cubs against the Sox. So nobody listens to my speech, they're all listening to the game, or attending the game. For any of you that are out there that are Cub fans, they were favored to win. They had the best pitching, the best hitting, the best fielding. The Sox, people didn't even know any of the players' names. They were the no-name team. When the dust settled, I'm sorry, but you know what? Cubs lost to the Sox. Hey. Don't forget I was on the south side. Daniel Burnham on the south side. However, the Cubs did go on to win the next 2 World Series in a row against the Detroit Tigers, but then it would take them over 100 years to win another one. All right, it's really painful that I am a Sox fan. However, that World Series will prove that this is entertainment. Sports could be entertainment, and you can make money off of it. So I incorporate stadiums into my plan for the city of Chicago. A museum campus that will not only have things for your mind, but things for entertainment. An athletic field that will eventually become known as Soldier Field. Soldier Field. Soldier, not Soldier's Field. All the soldiers there is a one. And museum campuses, so you can study different types of science themselves. The first of those museums will be built and commissioned to be built by the Burnham architectural firm, because it's my dear friend Marshall Field. Marshall gives $9 million to the building of that museum under one stipulation. His name go over the doorway. He's worried that someday his department store won't exist, and he wants people to remember who Marshall Field was, and if there's a museum, those last forever. So he wants his name over the door. So that's how we get the Field Museum of Natural History. Marshall would be very happy to hear, even after Macy finally bought him out, people still call it Fields downtown. So he didn't have to spend $9 million. Well, he's not Scottish, so he's not frugal. So, but he put the money up there. 2 other museums are put on that campus. That is the Shed Museum and the Adler Planetarium. They are donations like Marshall Field, so they can get their names over the door. Both of those are executives with Sears Roebuck. There's another executive, a vice president with Sears Roebuck, who actually takes the only remaining building for My World's Fair that's on the fairgrounds and converts it to a museum of science and technology. And that man is a man by the name of Julius Rosenwald, who puts the money up to take what was the art building and make it the Museum of Science and Industry. Rosenwald, like those others, wanted to donate to educate you. However, he did it anonymously. Those others want their names on the front. Rosenwald just wanted the end result, as it were. And so if you ever go to the Museum of Science and Industry, you can thank Julius Rosenwald, who also gave 500 schools to the South for underprivileged areas, poverty-stricken areas as well. So he put his money up, as it were. These are the type of people that I was proud of in the city of Chicago, and I knew this would expand and continue on. I knew we were great, but I didn't realize how great. I predicted we would have 15 million people in the city of Chicago by 1950. Oh, of course, my city of Chicago was going to go all the way out to DeKalb, up to Waukegan, and somehow, magically, all the way around to Michigan City, Indiana. I was somehow going to make Chicago, Illinois, take away part of Indiana. Go figure. But it didn't happen, in case you're wondering. It didn't happen. But the city of Chicago did become the 2nd largest city in the nation for a very long time. Unfortunately, I do pass on. But I taught my children well. I had 5 children. All of them end up in architecture, as it were. Many of them married architects as well. That would be my 3 daughters. They married men who become architects, as well as my daughters. And several of them being professors. One will actually be the professor and head of Cornell's architectural department. One will actually end up out in San Francisco. And has her great-granddaughter running that company to this very day, as it were. There's almost 200 Burnham descendants still alive, and a good chunk of them are architects. Back in the 80s, they said if there was ever a family reunion of Burnhams, it was the who's who of the AIA, which is the Architectural Bible. It's the Bible. So, yeah. So we continued on in the family business, as it were. And my sons continued on. Herbert and Dan Jr. continued on, and they decided to get us a 2nd World's Fair. and that would be the Century of Progress World's Fair, celebrating 100 years of the city of Chicago. Now this, they make sure they celebrate in the right year, and that would be in 1933. Does anyone know what's going on in 1933?
Depression.
The Great Depression.
That was years ago.
And we're going to, yes, that was years ago. And we're going to host a World's Fair. If anyone can do it, the Burnhams can do it. And we do. We actually do. They use an Art Deco design itself. It will expand from our museum campus, which was part of my Chicago plan, to the south for about 2 miles. It will show the latest in automobile technology. It will show the latest in Art Deco designs. And it will be illuminated not by incandescent lights, but by fluorescent lights. So anytime a Burnham hosts a World's Fair, it's very illuminating. But it is another hit. It is another hit. Our World's Fair actually turned a profit back in '93. And this World's Fair will be so successful that Franklin Delano Roosevelt will ask us to hold it the second year in '34. Because it's the only positive thing going on in the United States at the time. And we are the hub of it. That's where many people will see Judy Garland for the first time, but she will actually be with her sisters, the Gum sisters, performing. And many of you, men, will spend extra money to go see a fan dance where the seven veils disappear all over the place. As it were, Little Cairo will do that. She is an exotic dancer of the naked side as well. But everyone thinks it's one Little Cairo. There's 7 Little Cairos. That girl couldn't be dancing all the time. And then there'll be several other fan dances as well that will be encapsulated there. Yeah, we do a lot of bawdier things on that World's Fair, as it were. But it is all a success, and the Burnham name continues on. And the city of Chicago just continues to grow and expand. We've found a way to commercially become successful. We are the hub of the Midwest, and that is courtesy of not me, I'd like to take credit for it, but a little giant by the name of Stephen Douglas, who, as the chairman of the Territories Committee, Senator Douglas, negotiated with the Southern Dixiecrats to move the railroad headquarters up to Chicago instead of New Orleans, thus guaranteeing that all the lines of railroads would come through Chicago. Wow. In return, he would squash any ideas of talking about slavery in states to be built in the territories that he controlled the mapping out of. And so that's why we end up with a railroad exchange up here in the city of Chicago, and that became the hub, which meant that every headquarter for any railroad came through Chicago itself. And because of that, a lot of businesses settled here. McCormick decided to do his reaper here, as well as several other inventions. The World's Fair, many of the different countries had candy makers who decided to stay here because they were getting such a rave review for their European candies. And if they stayed in Chicago, they could build a business and ship it out right here, because all the railroad lines were here in Chicago. So it was cheaper for them to stay here instead of going back home. So that's why we became known as the Candy Manufacturing Kingdom. And that is because after the World's Fair, all these different exotic candies, all these different exotic treats, they saw it easy and inexpensive to send it out to the whole country. And you know who they learned this from? William Wrigley. Because Wrigley gave away free chewing gum to everyone who came to the World's Fair and said, bring it home if you like it. Tell your local dry goods store they can contact me at this address, and I will make plans to ship it out to them to sell to you right at your own back door. Why? Because he had the Chicago Exchange, which was literally the trains. And he built his headquarters right on the train line that would go out to Navy Pier to pick up raw materials. He could actually have that train stop in his building, They would load it with finished product on one side and unload it with raw materials on the other side, and then send it out to the pier or send it the other direction out to the terminals to be shipped out to places west, north, and south. It was a genius move. It was a risky move, but William Wrigley gave away 27.5 million sticks of gum for free and became a millionaire. So much so that when he didn't have a World's Fair to do that at, he literally took every phone book in the United States and sent 2 sticks of gum to every name in those phone books with the same message.
Wow.
He became the most popular gum manufacturer in the world. To this day, Wrigley Chewing Gum is internationally the most popular and successful brand of chewing gum. And you know what he came to Chicago to do? Run away from his father, who had a soap flake company on the East Coast. And when he couldn't get a job here, he became his representative for soap flakes here in town. And when he realized nobody wanted his soap flakes, he found a way to incentivize them by giving away things, and what he gave them was Zeno gum. He bought the Zeno Gum Company and found out people didn't care about his soap flakes, they liked his gum. And so he got rid of that and started selling his gum. He'd actually give away registers to different businesses free of charge if they would allow him to put a rack of his gum next to that register, which meant everyone who came into that store saw Wrigley Chewing Gum. It was product placement. The man was a genius. No big surprise. We were all geniuses because we were the city that works. The city of Chicago continues to grow and flourish and expand, and is always willing to tell you how great they are, because we are. We tell you how great we are by the flag that we put up for the city of Chicago. It's a white flag with 2 blue stripes. Those stripes represent the north and south branches of the river. The 3 white sections of that flag represent the north, south, and west side. Sorry, there is a bit of an east side, but they just didn't figure it was enough for them to split up the flag a little bit more. And the 4 red stars that are on that flag represent 4 major events in the city of Chicago's history, and I believe I talked about all of them. They were the Fort Dearborn Massacre, the Great Chicago Fire, the World's Fair of 1893, and the World's Fair of 1933-34. So that is Fair, Fire, Fort, the 4 Fs, if you want to remember it, in case there's a quiz later on.